What do you think that Bo did in particular that allowed him to have that success? I mean, certainly winning the coin toss, taking the ball and marching right down the field, that probably gave him a ton of confidence.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't seen the Broncos do in a while, right? Take that opening kickoff down and score a touchdown. When I played for the Broncos 03 to '08, we prided ourselves on scoring on that opening drive. It really changes the dynamic of the game when you can do that. The Broncos haven't done that in a long time. 3 and out, put your defense on the field, and then they got to play catch up, right? And then you're behind a possession right off the bat. And so I think, like you said, that opening drive touchdown, huge for them confidence-wise, but I think technically speaking, Bo Nix just felt more comfortable back there. I think the game plan was a little simpler for him. They did try to get out of the pocket, or I'm sorry, out of the huddle quicker. Sean Payton was quicker on the plays, so he got to the line of scrimmage with 12, 15 seconds left, so he could see what was going on. So he was able to just allow the defense to indicate where they were going a little bit more, and he could decide where he was going with the football a little more decisively. But then there's also receivers making plays on the ball. You know, there's a connection thing that happens between receivers and quarterbacks that doesn't just come at the snap of a finger. You want it to happen. You got the players. Bo Nix is very talented. Courtland Sutton is very talented. But what makes them talented together and productive together? Well, it's the repetition, the familiarity, the connection, getting to know each other on and off the field. Okay, and going through something together, and like, you know, that opening play of the game, offensive play, a back shoulder throw to Courtland Sutton that got the ball rolling, 22-yard gain, right? If that's incomplete, it brings up 2nd and 10. Let's say you don't convert, you 3 and out, you punt. It's a different game.
Yeah.
But totally. The very next play is a 30-something yarder to Josh Reynolds, right? And so it's a cascading sort of experience when one guy makes a play, the other guy makes a play, and you feel that momentum. All these guys are playmakers. We're trying to unlock the playmakers in all these professional football players. Courtland Sutton, that back shoulder throw, it's a timing throw, it's a touch, it's a feel. It's not something you just step on a football field and do. And so it's hard for a rookie quarterback to make that connection on a back shoulder throw. The fact that he did that on the first play of the game shows me a lot. It shows me that Bo and Courtland's connection is growing, shows me his confidence in Courtland is growing, shows me that Sean Payton's confidence in those guys is growing, and it shows me what Sean Payton believes is important for his team, and it is that connection between Courtland and Bo, because they script those first 15 plays, and that first play on the play sheet is the one you want to start with. And so when you're starting with that back shoulder throw, it shows me how you want the spark that you want. And that's the spark he wanted, and he got it. And I think it was really important for this team to get that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this over the years, like with Mahomes and like Kelsey, or even way back in the day with Elway and Shannon. You know, like they just kind of know where each other are on the field, and then it makes it just so hard to defend. I was going to ask you about Bo Nix's athleticism. You know, like we saw him get out of the pocket a little bit. We've seen him really take off down the field. He had 47 yards rushing. You played with Jake. How can a quarterback's athleticism help you as a pass catcher?
Yeah, immensely, because they can extend the play, and then you can find yourself getting open late. You know, at practice, every once in a while, we would do a drill called scramble drill, and that is when the quarterback gets out of the pocket, as a receiver down the field, you have to give him a throw. And depending where you are on the field, you either come back towards him, you go deep, or you come parallel to him. And, you know, as he's running, you know, towards the sideline, you run with him and give him a throw on that sideline. So all those guys drill that at practice. And when you have a quarterback who is athletic like Bo and sneaky athletic, I mean, I think people are taking notice now of how, you know, athletic he is, and defensive coordinators are going to start paying attention to that. There was a couple designed runs that the Broncos did to him, and I think that they should be careful with that stuff because, you know, 2 quarterbacks in the NFL, started every game for their team last year. Only 2. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Every other team at one point during the season had to start a backup because this game is very brutal, and these guys do get hurt. Now, Josh Allen runs the football a lot and was able to stay healthy. That's an anomaly, though. Most of these guys, you take off running, they're coming for you, and you're going to eventually get hurt. And so I think they should be careful with trying to go to that well too much too early with Bo, because that's not going to be the key for his longevity in the league. His key is going to be in the pocket, processing, dissecting, distributing the ball to his guys. But at the same time, a guy who's athletic and can make plays with his legs isn't a huge asset to your team. He just has to be smart about how he does it, right? And he was incredibly smart in the game with how he did it. Didn't get. I don't think he took one hit. Did he
Yeah,
actually get hit?
yeah, I don't think
Right.
so.
And so being aware of everything going on around you and getting down, that's huge. Inevitably, the game will catch you in a moment unawares and you will get hit. That's how it is for these quarterbacks. And a lot of them are more fragile than the other guys around them. And so they eventually do sustain an injury, and we hope Bo doesn't. But a quarterback who can get outside the pocket like him, incredibly valuable to an offense. The wide zone that we did, the stretch zone, a lot of keepers came off of that, a lot of the play action, and Jake would get out of the pocket and just make magic happen, whether he was dumping it off, whether he was throwing the deep cross, whether he was throwing down the field, or he was taking off and getting it with his legs. So there's a lot of options there for a smart quarterback who knows how to get down.
You kind of mentioned it a little bit there, but how do you think defenses are going to adjust here to what they've seen from the Broncos offense? Because to me, if like the Broncos scored that first touchdown, it felt like the Bucs were behind the ball a little bit right off the bat, and maybe they took the Broncos for granted a little bit. It kind of felt like that, maybe a letdown game for the Bucs a little bit. I do think the Broncos played well there, but certainly the Jets coming off 10 days rest here, they're not going to take the Broncos lightly. How do you think defenses will adjust as there's more tape now on Bo?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, it's hard to tell what a defensive coordinator really sees Bo as. Do they see him as a running quarterback, a la, obviously not Lamar Jackson, but one of the ways that you try to stop Lamar Jackson is you put like a spy on him that just kind of waits for him to run and then follows him, right? And doesn't let him break the line of scrimmage. You also do this thing called the mush rush, where you kind of don't really try to get to him and sack him, but you just kind of try to collapse the pocket and keep him in the pocket. The question is, but that strategy is often employed on a guy who they don't believe can beat you in the pocket. Do you think Bo can beat you from inside the pocket? Maybe they don't yet, because the first two games he didn't look great inside the pocket, but that's when you collapse the pocket. So the offensive line becomes incredibly important. I think what you're going to see with Bo is to continue to try to confuse him, to do a lot of simulated pressures, right? Like they'll come at him, they'll blitz guys, but they'll also simulate blitz guys and drop them out. And so the NFL defenses have become very good at that. Like you think they're bringing 6, but they're not. They're actually bringing 5, but the 2 guys you thought were coming drop out, and these guys are coming from here, and all of a sudden the coverage is confusing. And if you do that also, that's why the operation's so important, getting to the line of scrimmage with enough time to see these guys do that. And if you don't see them do that, and then it becomes even more confusing. So I think they'll continue to simulate pressure. They'll continue to try to bring pressure. They'll probably put a spy on him. I don't think they're going to do the mush rush thing, but they'll probably, continue to. I don't think the Broncos receivers have been great versus man coverage, and so I think they're going to see a lot of man, and he's going to face some pressure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that if you look at trying to beat this Broncos team, you say, hey, we're going to make you throw from inside the pocket. We're going to try and confuse you, and we're going to try and make life tough for you, Bo. Like, we're not going to let you beat us, essentially. I think that's you. I mean, that's. I bet you Robert Saleh is got some plays ready to go here to try and confuse Bo. You mentioned the pass catchers, the playmakers for this Broncos offense. Courtland, a little bit of a slow start. Marvin Mims, nowhere to be found. What do you think's going on with these guys? Is it just the chemistry issue like you mentioned there, or is there something else that, it's just not clicking right now?
Yeah, I think it's a chemistry issue, and I think it's, it's a variety of things. You don't have as much time in the offseason together as you used to. The CBA kind of dictates that you stay away a little more. There's not as much. You don't have double days during training camp. Just the sheer number of repetitions are not there to have that kind of connection. Sean Payton is new here. And so there's nobody here other than, I guess, L.J. Humphrey and Adam Troutman, who sort of know his offense from back in New Orleans. But when I got to the Broncos in 2003, I was a rookie, it wasn't up to the coaches necessarily to tell me everything. I could just watch the veterans. Everybody knew the offense. Everyone who was already there knew it. And so the young guys could fall in, not by having to ask coach or just everybody look at the coach for the answers, but for the veterans in the room who knew what to do. Rod Smith's locker was right next to me. I just did what Rod did. He was a receiver. I was a receiver. He showed me the way. He showed us all the way. And every single position group had that guy in it. Shannon Sharp was was in there at tight end. Al Wilson was a linebacker. Trevor Price was a defensive end. Tom Nalen and all those guys were across the offensive line. And so it was clear where we were supposed to be, not because the coaches had to tell us everything. And I think the Broncos now don't really have that familiarity with the system. And so it's a little bit confusing. And Sean Payton's offenses are notoriously difficult to understand and wordy. The language, Phil, around these offenses is incredibly difficult to master. It's confusing. They're words that don't mean the same thing in real life that they mean here on the football field. And so it's like, what are we doing? It was an interesting moment where I think it was this last week. They got the delay of game down in that first drive, right? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of more of the same operational stuff. Sean Payton, that was on him. Took him a long time to get the play out of his mouth. But when I was watching the huddle, right? So when Bo started talking to these guys, it took him 9 seconds to get the play out of his mouth. That's a long play.
Yeah.
And so just that it fills you with a sort of confusion or at least reluctance out on the field that doesn't allow you to really play free. Football is pretty simple, and we make it more complicated than it is. Offensive football is about exploiting the open spaces that the defense presents to you. You got to get past their front guys, and once you get past the front, there's a secondary area that's full of holes. You got to find those holes and exploit them. As a receiver, you got to run to them, and as a quarterback, you got to throw to them. And you don't want to make it too complicated for a coach. These guys are very used to making plays. Either it's man or it's zone. If it's man, we do this. If it's zone, we find that zone. And ultimately, the more familiarity I think they get with the language around this offense, and the more Sean Payton looks in the mirror and decides to pare it down and realizes this is a new group of guys. I got to start with square one here and build something around them, not around what I used to do. I think they'll get better and better.
I saw Bo said something after one of those first two games. He was like, well, our offense has to be complicated because defenses are so complicated these days. Do you think that that's true? Or Sean's a smart guy. Why is he putting Bo in that spot?
Yeah, I think the idea is that the defenses are incredibly complicated because of what we were talking about before, the simulated pressures and the disguises. Ultimately, you're either, like I said, you're in man or you're in zone. If you're in man, you got to beat the guy who's on your hip trying to stay with you. If you're in zone, there are areas around you where you should stop, turn around, and make yourself a friendly presence for the thrower. What you call those zones, that's where it becomes complicated, right? What is the name of this? I don't know, coach, but I know that I should sit down right there. And so there's an awareness, a body awareness when you're running through zones as a receiver, understanding the concepts, not just your route, but what you're trying to accomplish, because each route is always tied to the other routes, right? There's 5 eligible receivers. Yes, so we're trying to exploit these open spaces by putting defensive players in conflict and making them choose between one of us. And if they choose me, I throw to the other guy, or the other guy gets the ball. If they choose him, I'll be open. But I have to understand where those zones are, but it's not about understanding what it's called.
Yeah.
It's about understanding a feel for it and being able to sit. And a lot of that is the connection that you have with the guy. There's so much telekinetic stuff happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. The best connections I've ever had with quarterbacks, it wasn't about, we didn't have to talk about stuff. It was just, we understood. And so this comes from just knowing each other and being around each other. But I think that, there is a tendency with these offensive coaches to fill these players' minds with so many terms where they have to answer. I mean, they'll take tests the night before the game and do all this stuff that's just kind of jumbles your brain a bit. And then you got all these checks. If they do this, we do this. If they do this, we do this. Then it can get really difficult because you're stepping to the line of scrimmage, not even knowing what you're going to be doing. And at the very last minute, they snap it, and you're thinking as you come off the ball. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be thinking out there. You should be reacting, right?
Sometimes maybe the coach, you think a little ego comes into it. They're like, hey, I want to be considered this genius, so I got to make
Oh
this
yeah.
really complicated offense.
Yeah, not a little ego, Phil, a lot. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't become an offensive genius by having a vanilla offense that
yeah,
relies on the running game. Like as successful as the Ravens have been, I mean, none of their offensive coordinators have been called geniuses in a long time, right?
yeah,
But then again, they haven't won a big one. They've had great regular seasons and have lost the playoffs, and kind of inexplicably, because the running game is what's supposed to propel you in the playoffs, or at least allow
yeah.
you
And
to,
defense,
to
yeah,
make it far, right? And a good defense. So, but you're right. Like all these geniuses, and they want to be considered offensive geniuses. They want to go to the Hall of Fame. They want to put up the big numbers. Sean Payton has done that in the past. Top 5 in the NFL in points and yards, and for many years, and in New Orleans, and kind of was given that label with Drew Brees. And so he wants that back. He
yeah,
wants that back. He doesn't want to win these dirty games where it's like 16-13. That's not. I don't think that's what he likes. But it's also a different NFL now. Like, look around the league. I mean, the points aren't being put up like they were before. The touchdowns aren't being thrown. The defense has gained the upper hand
yep,
somehow. And I think, I have my own theories about that. But I think that you got to work with what you have and not try to, reignite the flames of yesteryear.